Welcome everyone to Secondary Objectives first ball video. It's exciting, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but hopefully it's going to be content that you guys are all going to enjoy. As of today, Games Workshop have released their first 11th edition balanced data slate. A ton of things have changed, from points to rules, even terrain layouts. So the purpose of today is we're going to go through how all these changes are going to affect each of these armies, mainly from that lens that we talked about, which is looking at how the middle table, kind of your average tournament player, is going to be affected by these things, not just how the top 1% or the top 10 players in the world are going to be affected by those changes. Now, as we go through, we're going to be looking at both the faction rules changes and the points changes. I'd love to hear your feedback. Just because it's my opinion doesn't mean it's the right opinion. So I'd love to chat to you guys in the comments. If there's anything there that you would disagree with as to whether you think these factions are going to be winners or losers. And let's get stuck into it. So the first faction that we're going to jump into is Blood Angels, and it's probably the easiest one to look into because, as you can see here, none of these changes are in red. So Blood Angels rules changes haven't been changed much. As for the faction, if we go into the point changes too, they've actually not had really many point changes in here that aren't going to be covered in the Space Marine faction. So not a huge change for Blood Angels. What does that mean for them? Their position is going to change based on how other factions are affected. So it's going to be hard for us to know until we finish this video that if some of their greatest opposition have gone up in points or had a bit of a loss from this data slate, Blood Angel's position is going to change too. The next faction we're going to look at are Emperor's Children. So Emperor's Children, unlike Blood Angels, have actually had some changes. So firstly, in line with kind of the rest of the game, the Dark Apparition stratagem has changed from 9 inches to 8 inches, which is a pretty standard change for most things. On top of that, Fulgrim has been given the mobile keyword, which again isn't really a change, it's just changing his rule so that he can actually now move through terrain, just like a lot of other things in the game now can. As for the points, let's whiz through it. So, Emperor's Children points. Now, again, unlike Blood Angels, they have actually had some points here. So firstly, their Rhino has gone down in points by 10, which is a really useful change because they've actually lost a bit of a benefit from their rule that they have on the Rhino that allowed them to shoot when they disembarked. Okay, so whizzing through the points changes for Emperor's Children. Now, they actually have had some changes here. So I'm really excited to see Fulgrim has gone down by 10 points. My opinion is if you can play a Primarch, you should, because they're awesome. So that's going to help him out a little bit, especially now he's getting the mobile keyword to move through all the ruins in the game. Now, the Chaos Rhino has actually gone down in points by 10, which is pretty good too, because Emperor's Children typically like to run a couple of Rhinos with Noise Marine shooting out the top of it or to extend the threat range of their battle line. Defilers have gone up in points, which I think could be expected. Defilers are quite oppressive, especially now they can tow into ruins and see basically the entire board. So hopefully this will encourage some different units to be used in Emperor's Children. And then we've had a few more points drops. So Lucius the Eternal has gone down in 10 points. He wasn't being seen much recently. Mauler Fiends have gone down in points. They were completely outshone by Defilers, who basically do their job but a ton better. And then the Sorcerer has gone down in points too. I think, unfortunately, the Sorcerer probably still doesn't have a super strong place, but a point change is nice. On the Legion of Excess side, so Shalaxi Hellbane has gone down by quite a chunky amount of points. 25 is nearly like a 10% point drop, which is pretty huge. So overall, in terms of points, it looks like what Games Workshop are trying to do is balance out the internal balance that they have. So it's not just, of course, for Emperor's Children to run multiple Defilers, and maybe they can actually get a bit of their unique identity back again, which would be really cool. Then, in terms of the detachments, they've had a couple of interesting changes here, where some of the detachments have had their dispositions changed. So Carnival of Excess is now running Disruption, Coterie of the Conceited is now on Priority Assets, and Spectacle of Slaughter is now also on Disruption. If we haven't covered this yet on the channel, but we will at some point, each disposition has its own unique way of playing. So Priority Assets, for example, typically likes to control the center and be a little bit slower. Disruption is normally focused around having lots of MSU or multiple small units to go off and do actions all around the board. So it's interesting that these detachments have had those changes because it's trying to insinuate that they should be playing in a certain way, unless they're a 2 DP, because then they can be combined with a 1 DP detachment to possibly allow them access to another disposition. Overall, I think Emperor's Children had a slight buff. It's probably not huge. You might get an extra unit or an extra enhancement in your army. But overall, I think Emperor's Children players should be happy. So a slight change now. We're going to move over to Imperial Knights, which is a very different faction to Emperor's Children. So firstly, the Gate Warden Lance attachment. Now this has had a change, which is quite important. What it now states is that at the start of the first battle round, you'll select 2 objectives on the table. You place a circular marker on each one. And when you draw a line from the closest part of that foundation marker to the closest part of the other, if any part of the model space crosses that line, that model's unit is said to be on your defensive line. Now, the reason that's so important is because currently the line that you drew from one objective to another crossed the entire table. And there were times where you could stand a knight in your opponent's deployment zone and get benefits that you're supposed to get from being in the middle of the table, which was really strong. And now you have a marker to put down, it's going to be a lot better. I haven't seen anything that says what size that marker should be. So I'm assuming you can't just put down dinner plate size marker on the table. You should probably stick to a 40mm marker because historically that's been what you've done. But maybe I've just missed that and it says it elsewhere. There's no other big changes that I can see. If we swap back to Imperial Knights points, let's see if there's been any big changes there. We've had one big change. So the Knight Castellan has gone up by a fairly significant number of points. The reason for this is most of the Imperial Knights lists that I was seeing on this detachment were running 2 Castellans, mainly because the stratagems were so good, you wanted to put the stratagem on the biggest unit you could that had the most output, which is going to be your Castellan. So with those going up in points, it indirectly nerfs that Gate Warden detachment and maybe will push players to try some other things. In terms of the detachments, there's just been some disposition changes here. So Dominus Bowbreakers and Freeblade Company are now both pushed towards priority assets, which again encourages that play around the center of the table. And Gate Warden Lance has been changed to Take and Hold. Now that is a really big change because Take and Hold plays very differently to some of the other detachment dispositions. Your goal with Take and Hold is to survive, stand on objectives, and control more than your opponent, which actually is hard for Knights because of the limited unit count. So it's not just going to necessarily be go and murder your opponent, which you probably still want to do, but at least now that's going to be focused around more of a tactical gameplay, depending on what other 1DB detachment they might be joined to. So it could be Quest or Forgeback or Throne Bonded Outriders. Overall, Imperial Knights have definitely taken a nerf. It was probably deserved. It was a little bit too easy to play. And for a lot of those kind of middle table guys, you were coming up against Imperial Knights and just getting absolutely slammed because it was a huge stat check that just did crazy damage. So hopefully this is more of a positive play experience. So the next faction we're going to look at is the Tau Empire. I'm currently ranked number 1 Tau, although interestingly I've only used Creep, so I don't know if I really deserve accolade as such. But let's see if there's been any changes to Tau. So first of all, straight away, we can see there's a change in the Monk Head attachment. It says until the end of the battle, all models in the selected units have the Scout 6 inches ability. It's not really a big change. It's more just in line with the way that Scout works now in terms of just in terms of the rules interaction. So nothing's really changed. It's just clearing up some wording. Some of the data sheets have been given frame because bizarrely things like Devilfish and Hammerhead Gunship at the time didn't have frame. And so units getting out of them would have to try and get within 3 inches of the tiny circular base underneath these giant gunships. So it's more just a rules clarification, if anything. There's not been anything else in here, so the big one is going to be points. Now, Tau have been pretty oppressive since the game started because of the amount of firepower they have, and towing into terrain meant they could see everything. They would ignore cover. It was really tough. So I'm expecting to see some big changes here. So straight away, we can see that broadside battlesuits, if you're using 3 model units, those points have gone up. And the reason for that is going to be that when you put stratagems on a big unit, you get much more efficiency from spending that resource. So in this case, it's saying that if you want to get all that efficiency from these units, you have to pay for it, which I think makes sense. Commander Farsight has gone down. Don't really know why. He was probably in most retaliation card lists because he's a really good unit. So that is an interesting change. I'm not entirely sure why that's happened. Devilfish have both gone up and down. So for that first model you take, they've gone down by 10 points, which is good. You didn't see them an awful lot. For every 4th unit, they're actually gone up in points. So if you're taking a ton of Devilfish, you're actually going to lose out, which most people weren't. So interesting to see if that's going to be a big change. Hammerheads have gone up in points, both for the 1st and 2nd unit and the 3rd unit, which is a pretty big slap, especially because now for the points, you could probably just get broadsides and you'll get more shots and probably a tougher unit too. Ghost kills have gone up in points. Now this does make sense because you were seeing ghost kills in a ton of units, a ton of armies. They have only gone up if you take the third unit, or if you take the weapon that's the most popular, the Cyclic Ion Raker, which again makes sense. It's trying to fix that internal balance and see if we can introduce some different units into the roster. And you're going to see that trend carry on. So Pathfinders and Riptides, both of them have taken some pretty big points increases. Pathfinders have got an extra 5 points just for the first 2 units you take. Then if you take a third unit, that one goes up a massive 15 points, which is actually 20 points from where they were before. So that is a tremendous change and is going to make a big difference to a lot of lists out there. And Riptides, they're again being punished for taking just 1 unit even, but then when you take that third unit, the points cost is dramatic at 220 points. On top of that, you've then got points cost for the Ion Accelerator too. So I'd expect to see a lot less Riptides and maybe see Tau try and navigate to look at some different options. The Storm Surge has gone up. That seems a bit of an anomaly. I don't think Storm Surges were played an awful lot. Maybe you correct me otherwise, but I've not seen them other than my friend Max, who has 2 beautiful ones, and he runs them because they look cool. The Twin Lance deserve everything they get. They should be up at 300 points. They are ridiculous. Everyone who's played against them will agree that is a stupid unit. You'll probably still see them at 220 points. They're still amazing. And then the Tiger Shark has gone up in points, which, again, maybe I'm a bit off the meta right now, but I've not seen Tiger Sharks around. Maybe they deserve to go up in points. And then lastly in here, the detachments, they've had a few changes that are probably the right thing to do. So Retaliation Cadre has gone up to 3 DP, which makes sense. It's really strong, and combining it with things like Experimental Cadre was proving kind of crazy. So having got to 3 DP means you have to actually make a solid choice and say, this is all I'm going to be playing. Modka was also terrorizing the tables, even at 3 DP as well, and the force disposition has been changed here to priority assets, which, like we've said already, is going to make a big change to how Modka players are playing the game. They're going to have to focus on holding the middle and doing actions rather than just blowing your opponent away. Or more likely, they'll probably do both of those things because that's what Tau do. Overall, Tau have definitely had a nerf here. They're not as good as they were. I don't think it's as devastating as it could have been. I think Tau are still in a pretty good place. They're just probably a little bit more in line with some of the top factions. Chaos Space Marines. They've not had an awful lot of changes, but they've had one that is really big. So the one here that's really worth pointing out is for Defilers. Defilers are everywhere. They are effectively the identity of Chaos Space Marines right now. Defilers have had a change so that when they use their ability, the Demon Forge ability, rather than getting 4 rerolls to wound, they just reroll wound rolls of 1. They're still brilliant. They're just not as ridiculous as they once were. So that is a really positive change in my opinion. In terms of the points, we'll get into that now. So, Chaos Space Marines have had a huge amount of points changes. We have had a Badamada Spoiler go up, a Curse Cultist go up, Chaos Predator Annihilators go up, Chaos Predator Destructors go up, Chosen, Dark Commune, Defilers, Huron Blackheart, Masters of the Maelstrom, Vashtor, Venom Crawlers. All of these units were seen in a ton of armies, but because they were so good, you found that the armies you were seeing were really similar. And if you're anything like me, when I play against an army, if it's the same every time, it gets really boring. So hopefully these points increases are going to encourage Chaos Space Marine players to start looking at different options that they can take. The Chaos Rhino has had a similar treatment to the Emperor's Children one, where it's gone down slightly for the first 1 to 3, but if you're taking 4+, like a madman, they go up in points. Fair enough. And then some other units here have got some decreases, probably to try and encourage their play. So the Chaos Sword of Jump Pack has gone down in points. The Chaos Terminator Squad has also gone down in points. And then you've also had Mutilators, Nemesis Claw, and the Red Corsairs Reed Captain all go down in points too. These are units that are really cool and probably not seen an awful lot. So with the points increases and these points decreases, hopefully we'll start seeing Chaos Space Marines change around a little bit in terms of the army composition that we're seeing. And then lastly, in terms of detachments, so they've had a couple of changes here. So the first one is the Soulforge Walk Pack. They've had an increase in an enhancement that was seen everywhere, tempting addendum, whenever that detachment was used. And the force disposition has been changed to taken hold. So a little bit like the detachments changes that we've had previously, I think this is a way of Games Workshop trying to signify that these guys should be playing a little bit differently, or maybe just to change list composition, because to play taken hold, you're going to have to change the units you take. This similar kind of thing has happened with Murder Talon Raiders. So they've been changed into Reconnaissance as a 1 DP detachment. Typically, these are being taken for the disposition rather than for the benefit they get taken. So this is going to change people's opinions on that, and then again might also change list builds too. Overall, Chaos Space Marines have probably had a nerf. It's relatively strong. I don't think that they're going to be gone, but people are going to have to start innovating and creating some new lists. Over to our next faction, the scourge of a new edition typically, Aeldari. We've not seen them be a scourge yet. They actually have been in a pretty rough place from my experience so far. So I think Aeldari players probably deserve a little bit of support, and let's see if they've got it. So there's been a change to the Seer Council detachment, which is called Unshrouded Truth. And basically the change has made it so it functions in the way you would expect it to. It's so that a unit can up or down in a turn and then make an ingress move in the same phase too. So it basically allows them to go up and go down just like any other faction normally would. And that's it. Then the other part of the data sheet changes is a lot of units have been given frame. So this is something that's really important because when I was first looking at it, I run a Wraithguard army. And Wraithguards couldn't get out within 3 inches of a Wave Serpent because it didn't have frame. So you had to get out within 3 of the base. And the Wave Serpent is so big, that was basically impossible to do. So it's more just a clean up of some rules. The Crimson Hunter and the Hemlock Wraith Fighter are both planes. They've just been changed in line with the rules changes. Eldrad has just had some changes that he can lead models and that you can also have Warlocks be attached to the same units as well, which again is probably to be expected. It's just cleaning up some rules, really. The Skyweaver's Acrobatic Grace ability has been changed. Now, across this rules update, you're going to see a lot of units that have -1 to hit from range attacks have basically been given stealth. And if they had -1 to hit in combat, that stays as -1 to hit. So it's more like just a generic change, because otherwise these units were both -1 to hit and -1 ballistic skill, which was a pretty crazy ability. The Incarnate had a slight change where he can still be eligible to move if he gets picked up and put back down again, which is important because there's lots of abilities in Aeldari that allow them to move when certain things happen, so that's quite good. And then a slight FAQ change, which is just saying, can the Incarn use Inevitable Death in the opponent's first turn? Just so there's no confusion about whether it can be down straight away. Then, the points. Let's see if there's been a big change. So, Aeldari. They've had a whole ton of points decreases, which is probably deserved. I'm hoping it's not gone too far the other way, and Aeldari are now going to dominate. But overall, Autarchs of both flavors, the Avatar, Corsair Skyreavers, Corsair Voidscarred, both types are Farseer, Shining Spears, Swooping Hawks, Wolf Ghost Glaives, a load of Harlequin units. They've all had some pretty decent points drops, which is good. It's really important. Eldar at the moment just don't have enough stuff. They still do decent damage, but they can't really do the actions as well. They struggle to survive if your opponent can have a really big go turn early in the game. So this is just going to give them probably another unit or two and just help them play the game a little bit better. In terms of what is a bit strong, the success that Eldar have been having typically has been seen with Wind Rider Host. Wind Riders and Warlock Skyrunners together. Skyrunners ignore color. Wind Riders just put out a crazy amount of damage. So those two units have had a bit of a change if you're running, for the Wind Rider side, max units, which is probably a healthy change. Again, it's looking at that list composition, trying to find internal balance. Warp Fighters and Wave Serpents have both gone up and down, and it's all about the number that you're taking. So 10-man Warp Spiders, if you're taking a third unit of them, they've gone up quite significantly in points, which makes sense because if people spam Warp Spiders, it can be quite an oppressive playstyle. And then Wave Serpents, like all other transports, it seems, if there's 4 or more of them, they've gone up in points too, which seems to be now a trend across all of the game. Now, and there's also been a few changes with Harlequins and then with Inari in terms of points, and it's again all around these transports, typically for the Inari Raider and the Inari Venom, and then the Star Weaver on the Harlequin side. And it's all just in line with these changes we've seen so far. On the detachments, so there's been a few changes here with force dispositions mainly. So the Eldritch Raiders detachment has been changed to Purge the Foe, which is probably quite good because Aeldari were actually in a place where they didn't have a good lot of differences that they could take in their detachments. It was like the dispositions didn't really work necessarily with the detachment rules and stratagems and so on. So Purge the Foe probably works a little bit better with Eldritch Raiders than it did before. Warhost has also had a change to Reconnaissance, which is going to give them a little bit more play in trying to be a bit more tactical, as opposed to, I think they were on Take and Hold before, which is not good for Aeldari. They don't hold objectives super well unless they are Wraiths typically. So this is going to give Warhost probably a little bit more play. Overall, Aeldari here have had a huge buff, and this is hopefully going to help Aeldari players with actually running some more units and running the stuff that we want to run. They've had some big changes, and deserved, I think, too. Orks were tearing up the meta. The green tide approach with tons and tons of Orc boys was very impressive. So let's go through and see if there's some big changes. Crushing Impact Stratagem has had its name changed to Crushing Impact. Great, thanks GW. There's been a few changes just in line with the rest of the game, like Conniving Runt Stratagem has been changed from 9 inches to 8 inches. It's in line with things. The Go Get 'em stratagem has changed, and again, it's more just like a wording thing here. It just allows an unengaged unit to do this, whereas I think before it was theoretically allowing any unit to do it, but you can't do it when you're in combat, so it's more just cleaning up some rules. Some more big changes have been around the boys profile and just allowing them to take more weapons effectively, which is probably a fairly healthy change. It makes boys a little bit better. Battle wagons had frame. Boomdaka Snazwagon, Boomdaka Snazwagon has basically been changed so it gets stealth as well, in line with other things. These are all fairly normal changes. I don't think there's anything particularly crazy here. When it then comes to the points changes, so they've had some big changes. So the Big Mech Daka rig has gone up in points. The Big Mech shotgun and boys, these are all units that you were seeing everywhere. And again, I think it's just trying to make it so that you're not just seeing the same list and the same units all the time. Same thing with Gretchen. They were too good for the points cost. They're holding objectives with big OC and getting CP. It's understandable they've gone up a little bit. As have the Mech, Pain Boss, Pain Boy, War Bus. You were seeing in a green tide list tons of characters attached to all kinds of different units. And it was just creating these big Death Star units. So by doing this, hopefully it's going to encourage a slightly different playstyle. Trucks. We've covered transports a lot already. We're going to leave that as is. The biggest change out of all of this is green tide has now become 3DP, whereas previously it was being combined with 1DP detachments, which was really strong. So making it 3DP is going to make it more of a choice as to which detachment you're going to run. Dread Mob, Tactical Brigade, and Mordaka have all had their dispositions changed as well. So Mordaka changed to Disruption, Dread Mob to Priority, and Tactical to Reconnaissance. It's in line with changing the way that these attachments are going to play. And I guess Equatorial Hordes, the points costs for the enhancements have gone up too. Let's not forget that. So overall, Orks have definitely had a nerf here from where they were, but it was deserved. They were winning events. There were a lot of armies that just physically could not deal with Orks, no matter who was playing them. There was just too many boys on the table. So this is going to hopefully ease up the gates a little bit and allow people a bit more freedom to play against Orks. Hopefully all players aren't too sad. I'm sure they'll find something else to play. So Chaos Demons. So Chaos Demons have had some changes. Chaos Demons have had some changes. Mainly these changes here are focused around bringing the rules in line. For example, you can't resurrect characters with the Plague Legion Resurgence stratagem, or the same thing with the Shadow of Chaos rule. It just says that characters are excluded, which makes sense. It was silly that they could, so they've just fixed that, which is nice. In terms of the points, let's have a quick look if much has changed. So Chaos Demons, a few changes. So Beast of Nurgle and Blood Crushers have gone up. You were seeing Beast of Nurgle and probably most lists, and Blood Crushers, you were seeing 18 of them, 3 times units of the max amount of models. And that is always a bad sign. That typically shows that unit's too good. So their points going up hopefully addresses some of that internal balance. You're also seeing Lords of Change and Kairos Fate Weaver in nearly every list too, either one or the other, sometimes multiples, because they're just really good for the points. So their points going up, I think makes sense. The Fluxmaster and Shalakti Hellbane, both their points have gone down. We didn't really see those guys previously, so this might give you a bit more of a reason to add these units into a list, especially Shalakti Hellbane. The rules changed from her back in the day, has made a big difference to how much she's on the table, so this is hopefully going to make a big change. And then detachment-wise, there's not been a huge amount of changes, so Scintillating Legion have had enhancements go up and down. Infernal Puppeteer has had a big nerf to how it works, so that point's just gone down, which I think makes sense. But the other two enhancements were both used a lot, so their points going up seems like a sensible change. And then Lords of the Warp, like some of the other 1DP detachments, it was being added in just for its disposition. So it changing to Take and Hold is probably going to encourage players to look elsewhere, or just think a bit more about their list design and how they're going to run. I think overall, Chaos Demons have probably had a slight nerf. I don't think it's a huge change. The Blood Crusher list wasn't used super often, so this is probably fairly healthy for Chaos Demons. My boys, the World Eaters. This was my first love, really, in Warhammer. We love World Eaters. They have been in a very rough place. There's been some success out there, like a good friend of mine, Aiden, is smashing it with World Eaters. But typically they're struggling because every time they try and go anywhere, they get shot and they die. They can't hide, they can't stage, and it's been quite rough. So hopefully we'll see some positive changes. A few things on the rules first. So the Demonkin detachment, the Lord on Juggernaut model gets the Deep Strike ability as a Disciple of Khorne enhancement. So a few changes on the rule side first. So on the Cult of Blood detachment, the Butcher Lord detachment, the Butcher Lord enhancement, that goes on World Eaters infantry models only, and the Bearer gets the Infiltrator's ability, which is pretty fun. It allows some scary models maybe to infiltrate, which could be cool. On the Disciple of Khorne enhancement, so this is an interesting change. It changes the Lord on Juggernaut so that you have the Blood Legion keyword instead of the World Eaters faction keyword. This is important because the way this worked previously is this model granted the World Eaters army rule to a big unit of Blood Crushers, which was really strong. And the whole point of this attachment is you build up points and then the demons get these rules, not just get it from the start. So it brings it in line with the detachment. It's a bit of a nerf, but I think it makes sense. There's not much else in here, so let's check out points. World Eaters have had some big points drops, which I think is understandable. So let's do the reverse first. The Defiler has gone up in points. Everyone can agree, great change. We're sick of Defilers. Their points have gone up. Fantastic. Other than that, Blood Crushers have gone up in points too, which we've seen because Blood Crushers are being seen everywhere. But pretty much every other unit has gone down. So Angron, Predators, Terminators, both types are 8 down, Forge Fiend, Berserkers, both Lords that are riding Juggernauts, the Mauler Fiend, all of these points have gone down, which is amazing. Because World Eaters just can't survive. They need more units to be able to get through the game. So give them access to probably another unit is a good deal. My list has gone down by about 95 points or something, so I think that's pretty healthy. On the detachment side, so Gore-Trap Onslaught has had its unique tag removed, which now allows it to combine with some interesting things like Brazen Engines, for example. So interesting to see what people do with that. Brazen Engines has also had the unique tag removed and its force disposition changed to Disruption, probably because it's now with Gore-Trap, so they're trying to get ahead of the game and make sure it's not going to do anything too crazy. Butchers of Khorne is now on Taken Hold, which again is going to change the way that those armies might be designed, depending on which 2DP detachment you take it with. Overall, this is a massive change for World Eaters. World Eaters have just gone up tremendously in terms of their ranking in the game. They're probably still not going to be an easy faction to play because they're still going to get shot to bits, but we might see a resurgence of the full 8-bound list because 8-bound now are crazy cheap. Getting 6 of them for 255 points is a steal, so I think we might see more of them. The Golden Bananas, Adeptus Custodes have had some changes. So Custodes are in an interesting place. They're doing okay in 11th. They're not crushing it, but they're fine faction. So on the Custodes rules changes, they've had a slight change on the data sheets for the jet bikes and the Virtus Praetors, which I think is a sensible change to make. And then the Rhino and the Venerable Land Raider have been given frame, which is just in line with everything else. So we're not going to talk about that too much. In terms of points, they've had a couple of point changes. Alea has gone down in points. The Rhino has had the same transport changes we'd expect. Wardens have gone down in points fairly significantly. We saw them get replaced Custodian Guard recently because of how cheap they are. So this is, I think, an attempt to change the internal balance slightly. I've gone down for the first to second units, but the third units have gone up quite dramatically in points. And it was really common that if people were taking Aeldari, they would take 3 units of them. So this is maybe going to try and change that list composition and give us some different units. On top of that, if they take the Aeldari Lance, the points have gone up too, which is quite a lot. Hopefully, we're going to see some slight changes in list design, which would be nice. On the detachment side of things, again, a few changes. They've had an enhancement change in Lions of the Emperor, just to increase the points on the Ad Mona Mortis enhancement, which I think I said that okay. And then the Might of the Mordoi enhancement has had its force disposition change to Taken Hold. This is because you were seeing people take this for Purge and combine it with Lions of the Emperor. This is going to see some slight changes in list composition, and you're going to see people take different 1DP detachments or even change to different 2DP detachments instead. Overall, I think Custodes have had like a probably, it's like an even balance really. They've traded Venatari going down, but going up, sorry, but Custodian Wardens have gone up. So they're probably about in the same place, and it'll be interesting to see how they shape up. Necrons, everyone's least favourite army, unless you play them and then you love them. Necrons are very frustrating to play against, so hopefully we're going to see some changes that are going to make that not the case. A lot of the changes are just bringing them in line with the rest of the game. So giving transports and vehicles frame, changing reanimation protocols just to make it clear that it heals the same way that everything else works in the game also makes sense. Now, they've had some stratagem changes. So in Annihilation Legion, they've made it so that if unengaged Destroyer Cult and Flayed Ones units shoot, that unit can make a surge unit afterwards. Sorry, when they've been shot. That unit can make a surge move, which is different. That means they have to move directly towards as opposed to doing something different. And they can then move into combat, which is interesting. The Veil of Darkness enhancement, they've just changed this to allow it to uppy downy turn on, effectively. And then the protocol of the Eternal Revenant attachment, they've just changed this in line with the Tacoma Open EQ. And it's basically saying if a character in a Necron unit gets killed and revived, it regens, but outside of the unit. And this is to try and stop shenanigans like you kill the whole unit, you kill the character, revives, and he brings the unit back. That now can't happen, which is good for the game. They've then changed how all the kind of crypt text get attached to models, and they're basically, it doesn't change an awful lot, but they're basically saying it attaches to units that have a Royal Warden or a Noble unit in it. And if the Bodyguard unit is destroyed, the leaders separate, which is a healthy change. And then the Resurrection side, the Overlord with the Resurrection Orb, it's basically a similar thing to what we've seen before. It's just bringing the rules in line with everything else. And a lot of this then is carrying on in the same way, with the exception of the Transcendent Catan. So they basically changed its uppy downy ability to be like an unlimited advance move. So it can go as far as it wants to. And I think it's just to change how it interacts with certain abilities. For example, this now doesn't stop someone screening out with a 12-inch deep strike. It can now just move there, which is cool. And maybe we'll make the Transcendent Catan a little bit better. And then lastly, the Ophidian Horrors have also had a similar change that allows them to uppy downy turn one. So a lot of that is mostly just normal stuff with the exception of the Transcendent Catan. In terms of points, let's have a little look at Necrons. So what you were seeing at tournaments now, in my experience, is you were seeing Catan, Silent King, and tons of Destroyers, especially the mounted version, because their shooting was good. So I'd expect some of that to probably change. We've seen Chronomancers go down in points, which again, you weren't seeing a lot of, so that makes sense. Canatech Reanimators, I haven't seen a lot of recently, but maybe they were being used elsewhere. DDAs, Destroyers of both kinds, and Necrosaur all going up in points if you're taking mostly big units for the Destroyer side of things, and then the characters individually, or the vehicles individually. All of that makes sense because Necrons currently were just spamming those units and taking lots of them. So trying to encourage Necron players to do something a bit different rather than just take the really good guns and the really durable stuff is a positive change. That strategy continue. The Silent King has gone up because he was in a lot of lists. The Scorplate Lord is in a ton of lists, a lot of the times 3 of them. And the Tesseract Vault is interesting. I haven't seen much of it, but I guess the points increase probably means you still won't continue to see much of it. On the detachment side, again, there's been some forced disposition changes. And when I say some, there's been one. Pantheon of Woe, which is the detachment all around playing Catan, it's now got to play Disruption, which is strange. I don't think it would ever play Disruption because it's normally where you play lots of Catan, and Catan probably don't want to be doing actions. So it's a strange one, but hopefully it's just trying to stop them being too aggressive. And you just combine it with a 1 DP and take that one instead, which in this case is either going to be Reconnaissance or Priority Assets. So overall, Necrons have had a bit of a nerf. I think it's probably fine. Necrons will just swap to playing a different kind of army, but this is just going to affect some of the more common builds that we were seeing out there. It's our favourite dwarfy boys, the Leagues of Votann. Leagues of Votann typically have very similar builds across armies. You normally see the same kind of list pop up again and again. So I'm hoping this is going to be like the other changes, where it's changing some of that internal balance slightly. So there's been some changes to some stratagems. So the Brownfast Oathband attachment has a stratagem that allows a unit to get out of a transport, and this can now be done at the end of any phase, which is interesting. So it could be useful for doing it in the command phase to allow you to get out and maybe do a stratagem on an objective or sticky an objective, something like that, if they have that kind of rule. Or you can even do it in things like the charge phase to allow, or you can do it in things. Okay, the Leagues of Votann, our favourite dwarfy boys. So Leagues of Votann lists, in my experience, are always really similar. So I'm hoping that the changes here are going to encourage people to take some slightly different things. So the first thing we can see is there's a change to the secure position stratagem that allows basically a unit to get out at the end of any phase, which might allow for some interesting things, such as getting out at the end of the shoot phase to be in position to heroic someone in the charge phase. They've also had, again, just confirming that when you resurrect a model, you can't resurrect characters in the Delve Assault Shift detachment. Those are the main changes there. In terms of points, the points are a bit all over the shop. They've gone up and down in different places. So Beric and Bury have both gone down in points, as has the Brockir Ironmaster. The Capricus has had the same transport costs, and the Sagittor has had the same transport costs that we've seen elsewhere. So overall, the points have kind of gone down, but on units that you didn't see so much. And because it's two of these guys are epic heroes, at most you're only going to get 20 points out of your list from this. So it's not crazy changes. Maybe it's the cost of the enhancement or so. In terms of the detachments, again, there's not been many changes here, unlike everywhere else. We've just had a slight points increase on a specific upgrade for Armored Trailblazers. So overall, Votann haven't had many changes. They probably technically won, but realistically, they're probably the same kind of list that we're always going to see. Tyranids. Tyranids have been an interesting place, where some of the top players are actually doing really well with them. But overall, Tyranids are probably just okay. The changes that are coming in here is just the main changes in Vanguard Onslaught for the Chameleonic enhancement. So rather than -1 to hit, it just gives stealth, which is in line with the rest of the changes in the game. There's been a change to the adaptive instincts that Tyranid warriors with melee bioweapons have. And so when they're selected to fight, they can get +1 strength or +1 toughness, which is good. They can pick between durability or strength. And then the Tyrannocyte seeding ability is changed to 8 inches in line with the rest of the game. Venom Preps have also had that same change. Instead of -1 to hit, they're getting stealth, which kind of makes sense. So nothing too crazy there. In terms of points, Tyranids have had the Maliceptor and the Noro Tyrant both go up in points, which makes sense. The Noro Tyrant you were seeing in nearly every list because people were just turn 1 doing shadows in the warp and just decimating armies, so making that a little bit more expensive is probably good. The touch screen has gone down slightly. Tyrannocyte has actually gone down, but goes up for its 4th unit. I still don't think you're going to see Tyrannocytes very much. And then Von Ryan's Leapers and Zone Preps have both gone down too. Overall here, Tyranids have probably had a pretty good change. They've had a lot of key units there go down. The detachments haven't changed much, so Tyranid players are probably pretty happy. You're going to see more units in your list. Grey Knights have had a host of different changes here. A lot of it is just moving it in line. So things like Gated Infinity Army rule, they can go up and down in the first turn. Added frame to vehicles, makes sense. But then a few detachments here have had some big changes. So the Augorium Task Force detachment. This is saying that when this unit ends an ingress, the unit can make a normal move, but it's not able to declare a charge, which cleans up whether that unit can move, because in the core rules it says they can't when they arrive from reserves. They've also got a stratagem that just lets them reroll hit rolls, which is pretty good. A lot of these other changes are just bringing things in line with the rest of the core rules, so I'm not going to belabor them too much. The points side of things, let's swap back to our Grey Knights in here. So they've had some pretty good point changes. So Terminators, if they're a max model squad, have gone down by 15 points, which is a fair amount, as a Grandmaster Boldus. So if you take those two things together, that's a 30-point drop, which is pretty big. Transports have had the same increase that we would expect, and Strike Squads have gone down by a fairly significant amount too, which is good, because Grey Knight's weakness right now was not having enough stuff to do objectives. Now they could probably have a few more units of Strike Squads, depending on how you change points around, which is good. On the detachment side of things, a load of dispositions have swapped. So Warpbane Task Force, which was decimating people with the amount of shooting and damage it does, has changed to Taken Hold, which is going to change the list building completely. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I probably would imagine Grey Knights players might move away from that. Then Argent Assault and Immaterial Interdiction have both had their disposition changes too. They're both 1 DP detachments that were probably being used to change what disposition your 2 DP detachment was using. So those changes, again, are probably just going to change list composition for Grey Knights. Overall, Grey Knights have probably had a bit of a win with the points, but with Warpbane Task Force dropping, that's going to be a big change. So how Grey Knight players adjust will be interesting. I can see a list that have loads of durable Terminators and objective scoring now, as opposed to Dread Knights, but let's see if that comes to true. Dark Angels, the evilist good faction, maybe? No one really knows. Dark Angels haven't been seen a crazy amount up until this weekend at Edinburgh, where they won the top place. Typically, you were seeing Salamanders and Ultramarines everywhere. But saying that, Dark Angels have still got some really good units in here. So, starting on the rules, which is where we're starting everywhere else, is the Company of Hunters detachment has had some slight changes where it's every Adeptus Astartes unit has assault, and when it falls back, it can still shoot. And the mounted units, as opposed to just Raven Wing units, every mounted unit gets assault and can basically do everything. They can fall back, shoot, charge, all that kind of stuff, which makes sense. It's just clearing up some slight interactions rather than it just being for a Raven Wing. And then some stratagem changes too. So for Death on the Wind stratagem, it's allowing every Adeptus Astartes unit that's made an advanced move to still be able to charge, which is pretty big. Talon Strike detachment. Talon Strike stratagem is giving the Adeptus Astartes unit a lance. So it's just some slight changes that are going to make that detachment probably a little bit better, I think, overall. The Unforgiven Task Force has had some changes. I don't think anyone's going to play that still. We're not even going to cover it. It's still a really rough rule. Inner Circle companions have been given the same change. Instead of -1 to hit from shooting, they get stealth. The Lion can move through walls again. He gets mobile, which is pretty big. And then at the end of your opponent's turn, you can uppy downy, go back down in the first turn, like a lot of other things. The planes have had some changes. So the Nephilim Jet Fighter gets -1 to wound, which is pretty decent, but it's still not the best unit in the world. Ravenwing Black Knights have had some slight changes to their weapon profile. They've got dev wounds built in, as opposed to getting anti-monster dev wounds now, which is pretty good. And then a big change to the Dark Talon. The Dark Talon has got a pretty decent rule here, where at the end of your opponent's fight phase, you select a unit within 24 inches, and that unit could get -3 inches move and 2d3 mortal wounds, which is kind of crazy. That can save a lot of things from getting charged in the next turn. So I can actually see people running a Dark Talon now to try and make your opponent not really move very far, which is pretty decent. On the points changes, so some really surprising changes here. The Inner Circle companions have gone down, and you were seeing them in a lot of lists. So that's a slightly bizarre change for me. The Deathwing Knights and Landspeed of Vengeance is going up. You were seeing both of those in the tunnel lists, so that makes a lot of sense. Lionel Johnson, Nephilim Jet Fighters, Samuel, the Ravenwing Dark Shroud, the Command Squad, all going down in points. Those were all probably good changes because, again, you weren't seeing any of those really now. So having those changes is going to change some of that composition as to what's in the Dark Angels list, and it's going to hopefully make some positive changes. Overall, I think Dark Angels have had a pretty big win here. You just might be seeing less Deathwing Knights and hopefully some more other Dark Angels units. The Death Guard, everyone's favourite stinky boys. Death Guard have been in a bit of a rough place recently. As much as I find them frustrating to play against, they probably deserve a little bit of something to help them out. Some slight changes. They basically said that until you lose control of an objective, that unit is afflicted, rather than when they take an objective, it being afflicted for the entire game, which probably makes sense. Has had a slight change to one of his abilities here, where it worsens the ballistic skill of that attack by 1, which basically means it can't stack with cover, which is good. And then Death Shroud Terminators have had in your movement phase change, so they can't rapid ingress 6 inches away, which I don't think they could previously, but I think they're just clearing up how that rule works. And then Mortarian's ability has changed to 8 inches rather than 9 inches, which is in line with the rest of the game too. So nothing too crazy there. In terms of points, let's see if they've had anything big. So Death Shroud Terminator is going down. Makes sense. They were in a rough place. This is going to give some Death Alpha players a bit of agency back in running their Terminators. The Defiler going up in points is amazing. We love that. We're so sick of Defilers. So those going up in points is going to hopefully make people not play them and play some different stuff. Mortarian going down. We love to see it. We want to see more Primarchs on the table. And Plague Marines going down in points when they're in units of 10 is probably also good because we were seeing a much less Plague Marines on the table now and much more of drones, of Defilers and tanks. And you're just losing that kind of the character that Death Guard had, where they were running big squads of dudes running around in rhinos. We might see some more of that again. On the detachment side, just one disposition change. It's Contagion Engines to change to Reconnaissance, just so that it can't combine with 2 DP detachments to give it certain dispositions. So nothing crazy there. I think Death Guard have had a slight increase overall. They probably see it as a nerf because of Defilers, but I don't count those guys. I think they should be playing something else anyway. So a slight increase on their playability of other units is hopefully going to make some positive list changes. Thousand Suns have been terrorizing the meta right now. That army is very oppressive to play against for a lot of people. So I think everyone is expecting some good nerfs to this army to bring them back in line with everyone else. The main change on the rule side, there's an enhancement which allows a unit to up your downy. It can now be done in the first turn, like everything else. The Warp Meld Pact detachment has just had some slight changes with the way that it's worded. Twisted Mirage Stratagem has now changed 9 inches to 8 inches, in line with most other things in the game. And then the Sorcerer or Infernal Master giving the Bearer Scout is not a huge change either, really. There's been a change to the number of shots for Infernal Gateway. It's now D3 plus 6, which is pretty big when you do the hazardous side of things, which is a pretty solid change, I think. And then Kara State Weaver has had the same change that everyone else gets when it comes to the CP changes. On the points side of things, so Thousand Suns has had some points go up, which I think makes sense all around. The Defilers going up in points, chef's kiss, thank you Games Workshop, they're ridiculous. Chaos Predators both going up also makes sense, because when you're stacking those with Defilers, you're getting a durable army, taking out a ton of damage. I think these are both solid changes. The stuff that was really big is you were seeing armies with 3 max units of Sector robots, 2 to 3 units of Terminators, all with characters in or around. You were seeing Zangor everywhere. Having those points go up, again, is going to change that internal balance and hopefully make Thousand Sun players start innovating with some different lists. Sextile robots have got a ton of points, both for the first and second units and that third unit. Scarab Cult Terminators have gone up to 10-man units, because the 5-mans weren't that bad, but 10-mans put out a ton of damage and are really hard to shift. So those points going up makes sense. And then in terms of the detachments, so Hexwarp Thrallband going up to 3DP makes a lot of sense too. What you were seeing is that bit as a 2DP detachment combined with Sekitar cohort, and it was causing some real problems because it gave the Sekitar robots some crazy damage output. So now that being changed, we're going to see different list compositions and hopefully see Thousand Suns pivot away and try and make some different lists, which is really good. The Force Disposition changes, so Sekitar cohort now on Disruption, Ritual Regeneration now on Taken Hold, and Warp Forge Cabal on Priority. Again, similar to the others, it's going to change the way those armies play. And hopefully when you see Thousand Suns, you don't automatically say, I'm playing against 3 units of Sekitars and 30 Terminators, and we'll see some different lists, which is great. I've been playing Warhammer for years. I've been to tons of tournaments, and I've got some pretty cool awards. I still don't really know what Adeptus Mechanicus do, if I'm honest. So let's puzzle through this together. The Doctrina Imperatives have been given to a ton of units here. I think this is just to make them a little bit more playable. Things like Castellan robots currently didn't get that benefit, so giving them that is going to make them maybe more of a popular choice. We've had some changes to the wording just for the Radzone core detachment, just to change how units are being battle shocked and whether on a 5+, they're getting D3 mortal wounds. I don't really know what it said before, but now it says that. Great. The stealth optimization detachment rule has basically been changed. I think it was -1 to hit before. Now it's stealth, which is just in line with everything else. Belisarius has got mobile, like the other changes. I don't know how the Honours of Doomcrawlers rules have changed here, so I'm really sorry for the 2 admech players out there, but I can't really help you an awful lot. And it looks like rules changes have happened with melee weapons for other things too, and range weapons. So, great. Thanks very much. I'm really sorry this is not going to serve the admech guys very well. In terms of points, let's see if they've had a huge lot of changes. So, the Iron Shroud of Belistari, if you're taking 3 units of them, points across go up. But other than that, most other things have gone down in points, which is a pretty big change. A few months ago, 6 months ago maybe, AdMech were pretty devastating for the meta, and they had some points increases, and this might bring them back down again, which is good. Overall, it looks to me like AdMech have had some pretty positive changes, so for those 2 AdMech players out there, we're going to see more of you, so looking forward to coming across you at tournaments. Space Wolves have not had many changes, but some of them are pretty decent. So it's just confirmed that when you resurrect this model that they come back separately, like the rest of the rules in the game so far. That gives that model an extra 2-inch move, which is to do with allowing them to join Warhammer. And then the last one is it's just a slight change to a stratagem, which confirmed that they can make a surge move of up to D6 if you're Wolfen or Bloodclaws. So nothing too crazy there. In terms of points, though, Space Wolves have been struggling a little bit like World Eaters in that staging is really hard for an army that's mostly melee. But what you were seeing was really durable armies full of Terminators. In terms of the points changes, a lot of the characters have had some decent point drops here to encourage their use a little bit more. Terminator's gone up in points if you're taking 3 of them, which again makes sense because that's quite oppressive. It's changed the army composition. Hopefully you see less of them and more of other units. Wolf Scouts have gone down. So overall, Space Wolves have probably won from this ever so slightly in terms of a lot of their stuff has gone down, but Terminators have gone up. You just drop that third unit of Terminators, and then suddenly you've had a positive change. So I think Space Wolves players should be fairly happy with this. They probably hoped for a little bit more, but they've got some good things. Imperial Agents are near and dear to my heart. I actually really like them. I play them a lot. And they've had some decent changes here for the first time in years. So in terms of the rules updates, so units have been given frame, which makes sense. The colorless can now uppy downy in the first turn, which again makes sense. It's just confirming some basic rules. In terms of the points, so Grey Knights you didn't see much in Imperial Agents anyway, but their points have gone down slightly. The Eversor Assassin has gone down in points. He was used quite a lot. The rest of this all just makes normal sense. Let's stick with that. Some of the, if the every model has the Imperium keyword, so the points cost for using them as allies has gone down slightly for some of these units, but nothing too crazy. The big changes come from the detachments. Every single detachment is now 2 DP, apart from Veiled Blade Elimination Force, which is 1 DP. And the points cost to add these units to your army for those enhancements has also dropped dramatically too. Suddenly, Imperial Agents have gone a little bit of sauce to them. I was currently running Imperialis fleet with 45 Death Void veterans. I now want to add in the Veiled Blade, so my assassins get some really cool enhancements. They're going to get some cool abilities. I actually think this is pretty decent. Don't get me wrong. I still think Imperial Agents probably struggle overall. They're still not that good. But at least it's a little bit of something. So again, for us 2 Imperial Agents players out there, we've got a little bit of sauce back. We love that. Chaos Knights. They've had some changes. Nothing too crazy, really. They've just changed the attacks profile of some of these weapons, which is okay. I don't think it's going to make a crazy change to their game. And even on the point side, both the War Dog, Huntsman, and Stalker have both gone down slightly in points, which is okay. I don't think we're seeing a huge amount of War Dogs these days anyway, but maybe you might see some slight changes there. In terms of the detachments, a few of the dispositions have changed. So Infernal Lance moving to priority, Bastions of Tyranny moving to priority, and Laws of Dread moving to take and hold. Overall, I feel like Chaos Knights have probably stayed about the same. They probably needed a little bit more love than they've been given. Some of these changes on the detachments might change the playstyle slightly, but I think Imperial Knights players are probably a bit sad. You just have to wait a few more months for your next update. Black Templars are probably in a similar place to armies like Worldy is, where if you want to play a fast melee army, you're struggling in 11th. In 11th doesn't really suit that. In terms of the rules changes, so there's nothing really of note in here, but points-wise, a lot of their characters have had some points drops here to encourage maybe a little bit more hero hammer. Black Templars really revolve around using their characters to increase the units output that they attach to. So having those characters go down is probably quite a big deal. The only one that changes is the Marshal has gone up, and the Marshal you were seeing everywhere, especially with units with at least 3 of them. So this might make you stop at 2 and take some of these other characters instead. Going up also makes sense. In my opinion, it's not the most Black Templar-y thing in the world. You should be running lots of Crusader squads, etc. So I think this probably encourages a certain type of list design. Those are the main changes for Black Templars. I think overall that's a positive. It's not crazy, but it's going to help Black Templars get a little bit more agency out of the game. Next we have Drukhari. So Drukhari, I think, have actually been doing okay. They've not been tearing everything up, but they've also not been doing super well. They're quite middling at the moment, so some changes here might help out a little bit. The Covenant Coterie detachment has just had a bit of a change, and it's just focusing that if you bring a model back to life, again, it's not part of an attached unit. It's the same change you've seen everywhere else. Raiders, Ravagers, and Venoms have been given frame. Then Archon has been, they've just clarified how its Shadow Field ability works. There's no real change to it. It's just saying that when you fail to save, you lose your Shadow Field ability. So there's nothing too crazy here. It's just confirming some rules. In terms of the points, they've also not really had many points changes. You were seeing a ton of Ravagers, so Ravagers have gone up slightly in points. Raiders and Venoms have seen the same changes that every other transport has had. And in terms of detachments, they've just had some disposition changes. Covenant Coterie is now on taken hold, Exhibition of Slaughter is on reconnaissance, and Capellite Agonist is on disruption. I don't think much of that is going to change how Drukhari play. It's more like some just kind of sideways changes. So Drukhari players probably were hoping for a bit more. I think they're still very playable. As always, they're just a difficult army to play. Drukhari, probably about the same as they used to be. Genestealer Cults, I've not seen on the table forever. Maybe it's just me and I've missed them, but they used to be around quite a lot and they seem to have died a death. So let's see if any of this changes. They're just talking about how you can't revive characters into squads, which is important. Nothing else in here is super crazy. A lot of this is just changing the way that certain stratagems have wording from 9 inches to 8 inches in line with a lot of 11th edition changes. In terms of their points, let's see if there's been a big change there. Aberrants, Acolyte hybrids, hybrid metamorphs, neophyte hybrids, pure trained Genestealers, all going down in points is pretty huge. A lot of players love all these units, especially running Aberrants, the muscle beach strategy. So I think overall that's a really positive change for GSC. Transports having the same change as everything else makes sense, but the Goliath truck transport, Atalan Jackal is going down in points just in general for 5 and 10 models. It's quite big. Avatar going up if you're taking 3 of them is fine. Not many people were taking 3. Detachment change. They've had 2 detachments change disposition. So Xenocult Masses and Heroes of the Uprising are now Reconnaissance and Disruption sequentially. Overall, GSC have had a bit of a glow up here. You're going to get a lot more. You're going to get probably another unit, another 2 units maybe in your army or in your list if you're already taking a lot of these, which a lot of people are. So I think we might see a bit of a resurgence on GSC in the future. And then finally, we have Space Marines. Oh boy. Space Marines have been tearing up the meta recently. They are really strong. They're really reliable. They're really durable. You get a ton of models in your army. They've been a bit of a problem, so I'm hoping to see some of this change. Oath of Moment hasn't really changed. It's just re-clarifying that if you take other kind of Space Marine factions like Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Death Watch, Space Wolves, you don't get +1 to wound. It's not really changed. It's just clarifying what we already knew. Stormlance Task Force has had some changes, so it's been given a stratagem that gives a unit lance effectively, and then the Ride Harsh, Ride Fast stratagem is giving units -1 to wound, whereas previously I think it was -1 to hit. So it's just changing that kind of durability slightly. A load of units have been given frame, which makes sense. Captains now can't be attached to Blade Guard veterans unless they have relic shields or Hellblasters and they have plasma pistols. It's just making the models join the things that they're supposed to join. The Chatfield jump pack's been given a pistol. Great. Huge change. Company Heroes is interesting. They've just removed the Company Hero rule entirely, which I think means that they can now be run without a character. So running them around on their own is probably going to be quite a big change, I think, for units. Intercessor squads, they've slightly changed the way that rule works. So instead of just giving them a set number of attacks, they're just giving them +2 attacks to their bolt rifles, which is intriguing because I wonder if there's going to be certain stratagems out there where they might be able to get extra attacks on their shots. So I haven't really looked that up yet, but there's going to be some changes there. Robute Guilliman now can move through walls like all the other Primarchs. And then really, I don't think there's any other changes in there that are super impactful. The main changes for Space Marines are going to be on the points. So let's see what we've got. So aggressors going down quite significantly is good. We've had some slight changes for Centurions. If they take last cannon, they cost extra points. The same transports that we're expecting, drop pods and pulsers, their points are changing as is. Eradicated squads of heavy bolters, they were being used a lot as kind of chaff units, so them going up makes sense. Infernus were horrendous in the Salamanders detachments, so taking units of 10 and having them go up is a good change. As are Inceptors, you were seeing quite a lot of Inceptors now with the changes to Deep Strike, they were quite oppressive. The same thing with Librarians, Lieutenants, Landspeeders. All these units you were seeing everywhere, and in every army you were seeing normally 3 of them. So nearly all of these changes I agree with. Hopefully it's going to make sure that Space Marines are going to change how they compose lists. I'm going to see some different units in here. Suppressors have gone up. They're a little bit different. It's just -1 to hit as a rule is now a super strong one combined with cover. So suppressors going up is going to make that a little bit more of a tactical choice rather than just slamming them into a list because they're cheap. These changes all make a lot of sense. I think this is going to help make Space Marines not quite as strong. I was probably expecting some harsher changes to Space Marines. So whilst they've lost their strength a little bit, I can probably see them just pivoting to different detachments, maybe moving back to the traditional Ultramarines list that you've seen before with a ton of Vindicators and Predators and so on. I think Space Marines have definitely had a nerf, but they haven't had a crazy amount of changes. It's just enough to probably bring them in line. So that is, overall, that's the data slate covered. There's a lot in there. I'm not going to go through the layout changes because there's only a couple that have changed. But really, a lot of this is helping for the game. It's clarifying how certain rules are working. It's trying to hit certain armies and factions that were really strong. And it's tried to make some of those factions that are not doing so well and push them up a little bit. I think there's a lot of this that is really positive. I'll be interested to see how this all shakes out. I'm playing at a few major tournaments coming up, like Kent Super Major, Manchester. So hopefully you're going to see me put this all into action and see how some of these factions work out. And that's it. Thank you all for joining my first video. That was super long. I've learned a lot from doing this. I'm definitely going to try not to cover the first few factions in as much detail and try and rattle through like I was towards the end. But if you stuck all this way with me, thank you so much. Please leave a comment. Please subscribe. It means an awful lot to me. And most of all, don't forget your secondary objective.